This is episode 81 of the Fitness and Post podcast. To access the show notes for this episode, please visit fitnessandpost.com/81. This episode is sponsored by GeekDesk. GeekDesk provides high-quality adjustable height desks. With the simple click of a button, you can change the height of your desk from sitting to standing in seconds, which can help you become more productive, ease and prevent pain, stay healthy, and live longer. I've owned a Geek Desk myself for years, and I love it. They are strong, durable, and, dare I say, even quite sexy. To learn more about the different options that Geek Desk offers, visit fitnessandpost.com/geekdesk. My name is Zach Arnold. I'm a film and television editor and the creator of Fitness and Post. I've spent many years working brutally long hours in a dark room and battled numerous health problems due to the sedentary nature of my career, and that's what led me to building Fitness and Post. Whether you work in post-production like me, or if you're a designer, programmer, animator, composer, or anyone working a sedentary job all day, we'll help you learn how to sit less, focus more, eat better, and bring health and wellness back into your life. You spend all day fixing it in post, now it's time for some fitness in post. Hello and welcome to the Fitness in Post podcast, where it is my mission to help you optimize the most powerful operating system that you have, yourself. My guest today is New York Times best-selling author Greg McKeown, author of Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less, as well as the founder of This Inc., a company with a mission to inspire millions of people to design their essential mission in life. Their clients include Adobe, Apple, Airbnb, Cisco, Google, Facebook, Pixar, Salesforce.com, Twitter, Yahoo. This is just to name a few. His writing has appeared or been covered by Fast Company, Fortune, Huffington Post, Politico, and Inc. magazine, as well as Harvard Business Review. He has also been interviewed on numerous television and radio shows, including NPR and NBC. If you've ever found yourself at the end of a crazy busy day saying, "How in the world is it 9 p.m.? I feel like I haven't done anything with my day," then you need to listen to this episode. In today's world of instant gratification, endless entertainment, social media, and incessant notifications, we simply don't know how to think critically for ourselves anymore, and instead, we spend all day reacting to the world around us rather than proactively doing the things that are important. But imagine if you could take that time and you could instead move yourself closer to the things that are truly important to you. If you don't understand the difference between being busy or being productive, you're going to understand the difference by the end of this episode, I promise. But before we get to our interview, I want to announce that I am still collecting questions for upcoming Q&A podcasts that I'm going to be releasing every month. I receive quite a few common questions via email and Facebook on a regular basis, and I figured it could be very helpful to start answering these questions for my whole audience rather than just for the individuals that were asking the questions. And I have also brought on the company Athletic Greens to provide a monthly prize for those who submit the questions that I answer. So here's how it works. If you have a question that you'd like us to answer that fits within the general topics that we discuss, including activity and movement in the workplace, nutrition, productivity, life balance, and stress management, or questions as they relate to career advancement in post-production, you can just submit your questions at fitnessandpost.com/questions. For every question that I read on the show, I will send a Fitness and Post t-shirt and a blender bottle. And I will then do a random drawing amongst those winners, and one person per month will receive a 30-day supply of my favorite green supplement on the planet, Athletic Greens. I discovered this stuff via Tim Ferriss, and it is fantastic. I drink 1 tablespoon with water in the morning, and I get 100% of my daily required amount of greens. Plus, it doesn't taste like the bottom of a shoe like most green powders. It actually tastes really good. To learn more, just visit fitnessandpost.com/greens. And now, without further ado, my interview with New York Times bestselling author Greg McKeown. I'm here today with Greg McKeown, who is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. And for anybody that hears that title and thinks, oh God, minimalism and new agey, and I just want to get rid of all my possessions and not have an iPhone and live in the mountains, this conversation has nothing to do with that, because essentialism is actually something everybody can do. And I absolutely love this book. It had a huge impact on my life. And Greg, I'm so pleased to have you here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So what I want to start with is just unpacking, jumping right into and understanding what is your idea behind essentialism and what does it mean? Because I want people to understand this is something that anybody can do. It's not, I'm throwing away my entire life and starting over. So let's just unpack it.
Well, to do that, we ought to at least look at the problem it's trying to address. The enemy of our story is non-essentialism, or the idea that we can do it all, that we can fit it all in, and that our life falls into a pattern called the undisciplined pursuit of more. And the challenge with that whole idea is that it's not just individual behavior these days. It's not that just somebody happens to fall into this. It's that the whole of our society has kind of slipped into this approach to life. And so when I ask people all over, whether they find themselves stretched too thin at work or at home, whether they find themselves being busy but not productive, whether they sometimes say yes just to please or avoid trouble, whether it's a typical experience to have their agenda hijacked by somebody else's agenda. People say yes to all of this. So it's bigger than individual behavior. It's a cultural challenge that we're in right now. And the antidote to that problem is essentialism, or the disciplined pursuit of less but better. And that's really what the book is about. It's about 3 key ways to be able to live and lead as an essentialist. Those 3 things are to explore what is essential, to create space to ask that question, to then, as gracefully as possible, to eliminate the non-essentials, and finally to create a system as effortless as possible to get the most important things done. That is the enemy and the antidote.
Well, just the fact that you use the word system means that everybody that listens to my show regularly knows that I could jump off on a tangent for hours. I love systems. I'm all about designing systems in my life that make my life easier and lower energy and learning how to strip away the things that are non-essential. But I like that you've decided to point out what we're trying to escape from first, because you've worked with clients like Adobe, Apple, Cisco, Google, Facebook. Like, these are not small little mom and pop shops. These are some of the biggest, most powerful corporations in the world. So having worked with them, let's go a little bit deeper into what some of these cultural and societal problems are that we're all dealing with when it comes to non-essentialism.
Let's give it some deeper history. So I think there's been 3 historical waves of non-essentialism. And the first wave can be indicated through examining the history of a single word, of the word priority, which came into the English language in the 1400s, and it was singular, the prior thing, the very first thing. And it stayed singular for the next 500 years. So that means that nobody in the English-speaking world, in any casual conversation, started speaking of the word priorities. And the reason they didn't is because it doesn't make any sense. You can't have very, very many, very first before all other things. This shift happened as part of the Industrial Revolution. It was in the 1900s that we pluralized the term, and there's something there about how we started to think about more, and if you can just fit it all in, you can have it all. And that was wave 1. Wave 2 was the post-Second World War era. This was the most societally discombobulating experience in the modern age. And instead of mourning for a year or trying to, somehow cathartically figure out what had just happened systemically, what we did as a society is we just moved on. And we moved on into a panem era, which is the Latin for the circus and bread. So literally this was where we started moving into being consumers instead of citizens. It's where we, suddenly it was about he who dies with the most toys wins. And this is wave 2. Wave 3 is one we're all witness to. It's in the last 10 years as we've gone from being connected to hyperconnected. And in the same period, we've gone from information overload to opinion overload. And so what I'm trying to illustrate in these three waves of non-essentialism is that the current situation we find ourselves in has deep historical roots, that we didn't invent this problem. It's bigger than you. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than just individual behavior. It's a way of thinking, but it has become so dominant, it's become normalized, which means, it's like fish discover water last. Nobody even sees it. So they have a sense that they're pretty stressed, but they don't have a sense of how monopolistic this view is now, this dominant assumption. And this isn't, to me, this isn't depressing, this discussion. This isn't okay, well, what hope do we have? It's an awakening, an ability to say, oh, that's why everybody is celebrating the busy. That's why there's this glorification of the busy that we have right now. I was just talking to somebody else the other day, and how are you? I asked them, I'm so busy. She said, I'm so busy. I said, I've only slept 4 hours a night for the last 2 weeks. And but she's not really complaining to me. She's boasting to me. It's like a backdoor brag. And what I think she was saying, although she didn't say it, was, oh, Greg, I just think I'm just more important than you. I just think that, that you're not in as much demand as I am. You see, this is what's happened. All of these waves have led to what I think now is a busyness bubble. And the busyness bubble, like all of the bubbles before it, have an overvalued asset. Whether that's real estate or Silicon Valley companies in the dot-com bust. Like in each case, you've got an overvalued asset, but because it's a human phenomenon, not a technical or real estate phenomenon, it's a human phenomenon. It's just people getting into irrational exuberance. That's the economics term for it. Irrational exuberance over this overvalued asset. And in this case, in the busyness bubble that we're in now, it's the overvalued asset is one that has in fact no inherent value, and it's busyness. That's what we're celebrating. Busyness has come to equal importance. Busyness has unfortunately no value, despite the fact people will outdo each other in signaling how busy they are. There's no value if I walk faster past my boss's office just to show them I'm so busy. There's no value in that. If I send you an email at 2:30 in the morning, there's no inherent value in that. There's value in producing the right things. There's value in contributing. This is not connected to busyness. So that's sort of the big contextual evaluation that I think helps to make sense of our time and to see it with some perspective.
Greg, if you and I were doing an in-person interview, I would stop and I would give you a big giant hug right now. My God, this is so in alignment with the way that I see things. And I've made the joke numerous times that I was born in the wrong century. Because if I were born in the late 1800s, after the Civil War, and just kind of lived in the woods and didn't have technology and just did my job and spent time with my family, I'd be so much happier. But once you've kind of been awakened to seeing this, because like you said, the fish can't find water, and most people don't see this, but once you've kind of been awakened to it and you see it all around you, you're like, oh my God, this is everywhere. Like, how many people now in any industry, but especially in mine, you can't even have a regular conversation without them checking their phone or reading an email in front of you or checking a text message. Like, it's rampant everywhere. And it's like you said, people think that busyness equals productivity, and busyness is actually the antithesis of productivity, in my view, where the more you're running in circles and the more you're burning yourself into the ground, the less that you get done. And I'm assuming you've seen a lot of that at these major corporations that you've consulted for.
Well, yes, absolutely. This is, it was funny. I was at Twitter not so very long ago, and somebody there said, they said, Greg, do you remember what it was like to be bored? And I liked that because of the irony, because they were the ones that did it to us. But it's a great question for a time in which, in the past when we were bored, if a flight was late or you have to wait for somebody, you just had to be bored. You had to sit there. Maybe if you brought a book with you, you'd read or something, but you had to think. And the bottom line reality is, I think most people would find it easier to face their phone than they do face their life. And so we have an excuse now not to do any long-term thinking. We just check the next email. We just check the next text. And this it's like we've outsourced the executive function of our brains to the next interrupt. And I'm not anti-technology. I believe that technology makes a great servant. It's just that it makes a poor master. And so this idea of just being dependent in the way that we are, and as many of these organizations I've worked with, are, is that they don't realize what they're trading off. When we went to mobility, when we went to social media, there was a sense of what we were gaining, instant connection to people, instant access to information. But we weren't aware that there was a trade-off being made. We made a trade-off in freedom. We made a trade-off in long-term thinking. And so this comes kind of all full circle to okay, well, therefore, what can we do about it? And there are these three steps to applying essentialism, right? What is essential? Eliminate what's not. Create a system that makes it as effortless to do what matters most. So what can you do? Here's a practical thing to create space to figure out what's essential. Every day, I do it at night, almost every night, I will sit down and I write a journal. I'm grateful for the things that are key, and I try to write the things that I think are important, that I want to remember and pass down, to generations after me. And after that sort of, getting attuned to where things are today, I then make a list of the 6 essentials for the next day. Typically try to break those into 3 personal things and 3 professional things. And by definition, they're important things. And then I prioritize them. And then, and I'm only half joking about this, cross off the bottom 5. And then you take that top item and you really say, look, I'm working on that until it's done tomorrow. And then you move on to the next item, and just one at a time. So you have a priority at any given moment. That you have a better chance, if you do this, of being able to come back to focus, to be able to have a chance of answering in the moment the next day what's important now. Because when I don't do it, what I find is that my day seems to get away from me. It feels frantic, frenetic, and I just highly recommend to people this very simple practice. You just, every day, just do it for the night before, for the next day, make the list of 6, the essential 6. They're important, and keep coming back to that prioritized list. This is one practical thing people can do.
Yeah, and this is a practice that I took on. It must have been maybe a year or 2 ago. It was completely life-changing. And I actually teach people how to do this in my online learning program, Optimize Yourself, which helps people to move more at work and become more productive and have more energy and more focus. But this to me is always the game changer, where when I start losing sight of this, if I'm too busy or things have come up beyond my control, the first thing I say is, all right, step 1 of the system is I have to prioritize what's important to me during the day, go to my evening journal, go to my morning journal, and it's not journaling my deepest thoughts and feelings and desires in a little purple diary with a heart-shaped lock. It's just, here are the things that I want to prioritize for the day, and then people will ask me, well, how in the world do you get so much done? You must work like 22 hours a day. And I say, no, I actually sleep about 8 hours a night. Well, how is that possible? It's because I prioritize and I know what needs to get done versus what should get done versus maybe what has to get done. And when you just respond to everything in the moment and you're reactionary and say, ooh, there's a voicemail I have to respond to. Ooh, there's an email that I have to respond to. Everything takes on the same priority. And that's where productivity transforms into busyness just for the sake of being busy.
Yeah, exactly so.
What I want to introduce people to now is the absolute magic word behind all of essentialism that everybody has heard this word many times in their life, but they don't know how to use it. So I'm going to read a passage from your book, which is one of my favorite passages that really kind of crystallizes everything. And then I want you to help me go deeper into this. So the passage is, only once you give yourself permission to stop trying to do it all, to stop saying yes to everyone, can you make your highest contribution towards the things that really matter. So what is the opposite of the word yes?
Yes, the word is no.
Then that would be the magic word that nobody seems to know how to use anymore that gets us all into trouble. So let's talk a little bit about that.
I remember interviewing somebody for the book Essentialism, and he was award-winning executive, and partially as a result of that, the company he worked for was purchased by a larger, more bureaucratic firm. He goes into that new company. He's keen to be a good team player, starts saying yes to everyone and everything without really thinking about it. What happens to the quality of his work? It goes down. What happens to his stress? Goes up. And he almost thinks to quit the company, but then somebody suggests that he retire in role, which loosely meant look at your life through a different lens. Imagine you are only going to be paid for the value you create. And so that meant he was more selective. The result of his experiments, he said, I got my life back. That meant he was able to eat dinner with his wife uninterrupted each night. He was able to go to the gym again. At work, he found space again on his calendar. And in that space, he found his creative freedom. And in that creative freedom, he found his ability to make a contribution, and his highest contribution. So by the end of that year, his performance evaluation had gone up, and he ended that year with one of the largest bonuses of his whole career. That is the value proposition of essentialism, that if you can become more selective, more thoughtful, eliminate the non-essentials, build the right system, then you can make a higher contribution personally and professionally. What did he learn from this story? Right? That's important. He learned that you can either do a few things superbly well, or you can do very, very many things averagely well. And that's just a core trade-off we're all faced with all of the time. So let me take that story and that lesson and use it to directly answer this question about why don't we say no, and how can we learn how to do it, and so on. I mean, the key here is that I didn't write a book called Noism. I wrote a book called Essentialism, and the difference makes all the difference. The key is to figure out what is essential, and you utilize that, leverage that to negotiate non-essentials. So, for example, even if your boss's boss calls you up or emails you or catches you in the hall, hey, can you do this thing, this project? If you're an essentialist, meaning if you have thought through your highest value contribution to your boss's boss, in this case, and they ask you to do it, the answer might be something like, yes, I'd be very happy to do that. But to do that requires me taking time and resources off this other project that I think may be the real thing you want me focused on right now. And that's just a conversation. It's a negotiation. And it's a very reasonable conversation to have, because you're not trying to be unhelpful and you're not trying to be lazy. You're simply saying, is this the most valuable use of me in helping you? And I have somebody who does that with me, somebody that I've contracted with to do some work. And every time I say this, oh, hey, could you just help me with this particular thing? And it's maybe something that's kind of urgent for me. It always begins, yes. But do you want me to take resources out of the big project that we've already identified is super valuable to you? And every time, I'm telling you, just like every time, I just go, oh, no, you just stay focused on that. Because I know that's actually where the value is, not my momentary brainstorm on some other thing. So that's the key. The key to being able to negotiate the no begins and must begin with understanding the biggest and most valuable yes.
And I think that that's something that every audience needs to hear this, but I know that in my industry especially, I see posts on Facebook and social media all the time like, oh, took on a fourth project and, working for the next 4 months, and oh, it's great to have work. And I'm terrified of saying no, because you never know when the next job is going to come. Because in the corporate world, if you work for the likes of Adobe or Apple or Google, you know that you have pretty much a full-time job, and you do have the ability to say, well, hey, you've asked me to do this. How would you like me to prioritize this? But in the film industry, you don't work full-time unless you work for one of the corporate editing houses. So for example, for me, I will take on a project for 3 or 4 months, and then you go to another TV show and another TV show, but then somebody comes along, and they're like, hey, we'd love you to work on this show, and you're thinking, oh man, like I still have another month left on this one, but then I'm going to be unemployed. So I guess I'm going to have to work 2 jobs for the next month just because I don't want to be afraid of not having work. So it's a very complicated situation in our industry that I face all the time and many other people face all the time. So let's start helping people understand how to go deeper with saying no and actually figuring out when it makes sense to take something on and prioritize it, when it makes sense to just say, nope, I'm sorry, I just can't do that. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean, first of all, let's just look at the very art of editing. The same tension you just described between saying, well, do I say yes to both because I don't know whether I'm going to get the next gig. I mean, this is the editor's world, right? This is where you live. Is you can't have both. If you want to have a great movie, great TV show product, you've got to edit. You've got to, as Stephen King says, have the courage to kill your babies, or kill your darlings. In fact, I think is his phrase: kill your darlings. This is the kind of courage that's necessary. You don't just simply say yes to both, even though that's the temptation. I mean, every trade-off, the definition and nature of a trade-off is that you want to say yes to both. Do you want more money or do you want more time off work? Yes. You want to say yes to the whole thing. So if there were no trade-offs, we would say yes to everything. I mean, there'd be no reason not to. If you can have it all, do it all. The answer to every dilemma would be do both. So I think that this experimentation with essentialism begins in a way where we start to catch ourselves in the trying to do both answer. I can do both. There's a way to shove both of these in. And then just to pause and go, okay, if I can only do one, which is it? So that at least we start to prioritize. And so I think that there's a whole chapter in the book about editing, because I think that editors know by their professional experience a lot about the why of saying no and when to say no. And it's about taking those exact lessons and not thinking about it in that narrow professional way, but thinking about it for the editing of my life, not just the editing of this particular project. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's the whole reason that I tracked you down and hunted you until I got you on the show. I mean, I loved your philosophies, but you had an entire chapter in your book about film editors, and I'm thinking, if there's anybody that gets our mindset and understands it, it is this guy, because you described it perfectly, and the realization I had in my brain is that as a film editor, and for all those that are listening that are also film editors, we are so protective of the material that we have, and we are the shepherds of it. We have producers coming in, we have directors, we have executives. Everybody wants to throw all these things at us, and we're the gatekeeper, and we're saying, I'm sorry, guys, I just cannot do all of these things unless you want this project to become complete crap. And sometimes that does happen. But if the editor is able to manage all the personalities, they can protect the asset. They can make sure that the show still works by stripping away all the things that aren't essential. But the realization I had is, oh, I'm really good at doing that with a TV show, but I'm not doing that with my life. I'm the director. I'm the studio executive that's being so mean to myself, saying, well, you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. And I wasn't stripping away the essentials. So as soon as I heard the analogy of film editing to managing your day and managing your life, I said, oh, yes, this is somebody that I totally get, and I must get in front of my audience. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I think about editing as the invisible art. This is a high skill, highly valuable ability. It's discernment. It's curating carefully just those things that will be powerful. And it's of course the invisible art, because people only see what remains. But the brilliance is what they don't see. It's what never made it. It's making those good choices. I'll just tell you it's not in the film industry, but of course I've spent a lot of time in the writing world. And the power of a great editor. My editor was terrific. It cut out so much of the things that we could have ended up putting into the book. And I see it every day, examples of, especially once an author becomes established, especially once they become a best-selling author, pretty much they can get the next thing published, So even if it's verbose, even if it's voluminous, even if it really ought to be half the length or a quarter of the length, it will still get published. And I've seen perfectly capable, skillful, brilliant minds produce really underwhelming manuscripts and books because, the undisciplined pursuit of more. Nobody was tough enough with them. They absorbed everything because they sort of too scared to say no, I suppose. So that's true for editing in the publishing world. It's true for editing in film and in television. But just think about our lives again. It is a thoroughly important set of skills, and for all the same reasons that editing is necessary. That we really learn to make those hard decisions. The word decision itself comes from the Latin root cis, C-I-S, which, is used in words like scissors, or C-I-D, which is the alternative Latin root in homicide and fratricide. This is all to say that the word decision literally means to cut or to kill. That is an original definition that just speaks directly to the art and craft of editing. True in these creative pursuits, true in the creative pursuit of our lives. We have got to be just as willing to eliminate, just as determined to remove things, even good things, in pursuit of our highest contribution. The greatest art form we have the chance to edit is our life itself. And to sort of edit away in the same way as Michelangelo described that, you remember this idea, I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free. This is the idea for our lives as well, to cut out even the good things, even great things sometimes, in pursuit of a masterpiece that actually matters in the totality of our lives.
And I love that analogy. There's an analogy that I use all the time that I didn't come up with. I actually got from an editor friend of mine years and years ago, and it stuck with me. He said that as editors, what we do is we take this giant, gorgeous redwood tree from a redwood forest, and we spend months and months, and we carve it down into a pencil. And you're thinking, well, redwood trees are gorgeous. Well, you're creating something else out of it, which, like you said, with the sculpture, that's kind of what we're doing, is we're removing all of the non-essential pieces to create the essential image that we want for this product. And I think that now that we've established this idea of the analogy between how an editor thinks about a project and how you think about your life, that to me was transformative. Now what I want to do is go down into the super micro and the specific, because there are terms that I think editors can think, oh, of course I know how to do that with editing, but then you're thinking, well, how would I apply that to my life? So the first is when you're talking about if you have too much air in a scene, you have, too much room and it just doesn't seem tight enough. What we've done in our lives is we've cut out all of the air. So can you talk a little bit about buffers, margins, and a term that you call the perks of being unavailable?
There's something that's so normalized now in this non-essentialist culture that this fear of missing out that we've created the acronym, right? It's FOMO, a fear of missing out. You already alluded to that with this, if you get another gig, you're going to do both of them. The FOMO is the fear of missing out. It's a very real phenomenon because we are aware of so many things now. What we have got to discover, what the essentialist starts to discover as they experiment with these ideas, is the joy of missing out, or JOMO, the very act of not doing things can be incredibly valuable. I remember that I was at a conference one time, and they had, really terrific content. This is just one person after another coming in, well prepared, and I eventually felt sort of meeting fatigue, conference fatigue, where it's just, okay, I've been in that room so much, and I just secretly, I escape. And I'm like, I'm just going to go to the pool. I just need to be somewhere where I've got some space to think. I don't know if I was thinking about it just exactly as deeply as this, but just to synthesize the ideas and just to let it all connect a bit instead of just sitting there and trying to force another speech and another set of ideas into my head. And so I go down there. First of all, I am struck by how beautiful it is outside. Here I am at this conference. It's in this beautiful location, and I haven't even seen it. I go to the pool, so has a beautiful pool, and I just that moment, I was like, wow! It's been sitting here this whole time. I wasn't aware because I wasn't allowing any space from the schedule that had been given to me. And then what I noticed, and this did make me smile, was that about 15 of the people at the conference had the same idea. So they're all down in the pool, and we're just relaxing for several hours there. But what happened that was a little magical is that people started talking. The barriers between various cultural backgrounds was eliminated, and there was this spontaneous productivity of the very purposes of the conference itself. And it happened because we created space, because we actually said, look, it's really good in there, but we just need a little break from that. And that's a good example to me of this joy of missing out. There's joy in putting white space on the calendar. There's joy in not going to the latest event that somebody's going to, just so that you can think. And especially in this environment that we're in right now, there is actual strategic career and life advantage to be had by just creating buffer in our lives. Maybe you schedule 2 hours a day of just think time, space, that you're not going to talk to other people. You're not going to, or at least you're not going to commit to everything ahead of time. After I have a media day once a month, and this is it. This is this month's day, and after my media day, I always have a period of time that's just nothing. And of course, I will end up doing things with that time, but it's so good to have buffer instead of running right at the edge all the time, which means that we're going to be stressed out all the time. So yeah, this is the idea, I think, to escape, the joy of escaping, the joy of missing out.
Yeah, and I think that where that applies specifically to people in my industry, or really to anybody that's trying to improve themselves, and anybody listening to this, I'm assuming they have some interest or desire in improving the quality of their life. It's so easy with so much infinite information available to start ingesting podcasts, to start watching tutorials, to start listening to personal development books, and you listen, ingest, but then you don't do anything because you haven't afforded yourself the buffer, like you said, to process the information or to actually do the things that they talk about. So you can say, oh, I've read all of the great personal development books and I've seen all the videos from the personal development speakers. Oh, great. What have you done? Well, I've read and watched the videos and the books. But if you don't implement anything, what difference does it make? And in my industry, you can take all of the tutorials on Adobe Premiere or Avid Media Composer or Mocha, or there's so many different things. It's great, well, do you have a reel of that stuff? Well, no, I've learned it, but I haven't had time to do it because I've been learning. It's you need the buffer in your life to process the information.
Yes, and there's, as you are alluding to there, the necessity of creating space for the creative work itself is beyond even just a sense of buffer. That's just creating creative freedom. I know that when I was writing Essentialism, it was funny after got the contract to write it. I remember one of the first nights after that, I was sat up late and I started feeling that stress of how am I going to do this? And then the double whammy of, and you can't just do it by forcing it for the next year. You can't write a book on essentialism in a non-essentialist way, where you never see your family for a week, which, by the way, is no real laughing matter, because in quite a few acknowledgement sections of books, the author essentially says just that. Well, thank you to my wife, thank you to my children for not having seen me for 2 years. I mean, these things are said only half in jest. You can easily get into a situation like this. And that was a level of sort of hypocrisy that I just wanted to avoid if I possibly could. And so it was out of that. I talked to my wife, and we came up with a system, right? This is consistent with everything we're talking about. What is essential? Well, getting this book done. That is job one for me professionally for that entire year. Okay, what do we have to eliminate? Well, there's all sorts of professional things. I just decided I'm not going to do them. Really not easy for me to say no to some of those things. I'd really wanted to do them, but in the end I realized they were just too costly. So especially they would have been costly for my family. So, okay, we're not going to do that. Another thing I did is I put a bounce back on my email. I mean, literally, I think I had it on there for 9 months. And it said in monk mode. Look, I'm going to be slower in responding than I would usually like to be, because I'm working on a big project, and until it's done, that's where I'm going to be focused. And I'm sure a couple of people found that irritating in some way, but you can't do it all. You can't keep everybody happy. So in the end, the system included, I got up really early in the morning. I still was sleeping. I still do my 8 hours of sleep, but I'd get up really early in the morning. I'd write until noon, and then I'd be done, pretty well for the whole day. So I mean, I was always there for dinner with my children. I was always there when they came home from school, and it was a successful experience. It was a family friendly experience, and it was a great, compared to what it could have been, a really stress free creative experience. And so I think this is a living example of what we're talking about here. To edit in such a way, to create buffer in such a way that you can enjoy the most valuable creative pursuit that you want to, that you're seeking to give yourself to.
And you just brought up the second magic word that I want to hit. Because if anybody's listening to this, they're walking away thinking, I just want a couple of quick takeaways. The first one is the word no. The second one is the word sleep. You have an entire chapter dedicated to this called Protect the Asset. And this is one of my giant pet peeves, is the badge of honor that people wear because they're sleep deprived. And to me, once you step outside of it, it just looks ridiculous. So talk to me a little bit about the idea of protecting the asset.
Well, first of all, we would never say that employee, this friend of mine, whoever, they're so wonderful because they're just drunk all the time. We'd never say that. It would be silly. We would be laughable. Oh yes, the way they make the decisions when they're inebriated, it's just marvelous. And yet, we do sometimes, as you just mentioned, celebrate the idea of pulling an all-nighter, or the employee who's getting 4 hours of sleep. And we do put this sort of Uberman and Superwoman on display. And the reality is that if you get 4 hours of sleep, you are the same physiologically, psychologically, as if you're drunk. That's the level of your decision-making capability. And so in knowledge work, like editing, it isn't just getting a job done. It's exactly your level of discernment, of your ability to make a selection between two really good things and which one is the most valuable thing. And so the idea that over time that sleep deprivation will create the best editor is crazy. And the research supports this massively, that the top performers, I mean, this is Eric Anderson's terrific research on this, that the number 2 highest correlated item between good performance and great performance, like what distinguishes the highest performers in any field, is sleep. So the highest performers in his original study, this is the one that became famous with Malcolm Gladwell's book, where he called it the 10,000 hour rule. But the original research, when you go back and read that, as I have, is about violinists and how the highest performers slept on average maybe 8.6 hours of sleep in every 24-hour period, which is to say they slept seven and a half hours at night, but they also took more naps. And so why is that the second highest correlated item? It's because they were able to concentrate differently every hour that they did practice. They were able to give, it was good hours of practice. And that's true when we think about, about editing, about our professional work. It's not just how many hours you sit in front of the screen and you're going through it. It's how many good hours you have, how many hours you're able to get into the real work itself and show good judgment. And so this is the case for it. We are the only asset through which we can make any other contribution in our lives. And therefore, we need to protect that asset. And in fact, this is a good way to sort of tie it all together, because our highest priority is to protect our ability to prioritize. That's really where we begin. So certainly that means sleep. There's other things as well, but it means that we do those things necessary to make sure that our mind is capable of discerning well between lots of good options so that we can select only those ones that are the most valuable.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you went there, because that leads right into my next question. It's almost like you have my agenda in front of you, but I have no agenda, so I know you can't possibly have it. But anyway, this is the idea of the power of extreme criteria. This is another thing that really hit me hard, because I've been going through this process of becoming an essentialist, and just, I guess it was 2 or 3 months ago, I used some of the essentialist philosophies where somebody had asked me to do a speaking gig in New York City. And my first reaction was, oh my God, I would love to do that. I've never been to New York City. Like, they were going to pay for the whole trip. I was going to have a hotel in Manhattan. And then I slowed down and I said, all right, let's look at this as an essentialist. How does this serve my mission? How does this serve what's most important to me? How is this going to serve the next week after? Because I know that it's going to make me miss my weekend. I'm going to miss my kids. The next week of work is going to be really difficult. I'm going to play catch up. Are all those things worth this trip? And I ultimately said to them, it really pains me to say this, but ultimately I'm going to have to pass for now. This would be a great opportunity, but I can't do it. But I would love to submit an article or something to just share my voice with your audience. And a lot of people would be terrified of that. And their response is, it's a great idea. We love it. We totally understand. So there is real power in no, but I had to use the power of extreme criteria. So explain to me what this means so people can really start to figuring out what's the difference between okay and hell yes.
Yes, this is the best way to get into extreme criteria is to think about our closets. They're overwhelmed. There's too many clothes, and finally we say, okay, I want to clean this thing up, and we go in there and we take an item off the shelf, and then in that moment, something mysterious seems to happen to us as we're looking at that item of clothing that we've taken off the hanger, and we think, well, I mean, maybe it will fit me again, or maybe I'll use that in the future. It might come back into fashion. And what we're doing without realizing it is we're using the world's broadest criteria. We're saying, could I ever possibly use this again? Maybe. And the answer to that is yes, almost always yes. So it goes back on the shelf. The alternative approach, the essentialist approach to the closet, is to take that item off the shelf and to say, do I love it? Do I wear it often? Does it look great on me? We're asking more selective questions. We're using more selective criteria. Or even go beyond that. Marie Kondo has suggested we ask the question of that item in the closet, does it spark joy? And the answer to that question most of the time is no. I mean, you're all the way to the other side. And so if you ask that of every item in your closet, as I have, what you find is that most of those items don't fit up to that criteria. So you get rid of things, you pass things on. But what you're left with, importantly, is an entire closet of things that spark joy. That really works, right? That works in the literal closet. But it also works in the closet of our lives, where instead of asking, like this is a question I think we ask. The reason or the criteria we use for doing things. Well, someone emailed me. They emailed me to ask me to do it. So now I'm doing it. Like that's the criteria. That's like an incredibly broad criteria. They asked, so I'm doing it. They emailed me, they text me, I'm doing it. You can see that the same problem happens is that it's even worse than our closets because people are stuffing clothes into our closet all day long. And in fact, I mean, it's literally true, isn't it? That I mean, we can end up with more emails in our inbox that we began the day with, despite sort of trying to take these items out all day. So you can see this is the challenge. The selective criteria as it applies to the closet of our lives is to say, is this the very best use of me? And if it's not, then we question it. It doesn't mean we say no without thinking about it either. You know, back to this idea. I didn't write a book called Noism. We don't suddenly just say no to everyone and everything without thinking about it, but we question it now. We pause now, and we say, look, is it the best use of me? Well, maybe not. What would be a better use of me? What would happen if I didn't do this and I just created a time rebate of half an hour or an hour or a day or a week? I mean, some of these projects are immensely time consuming and so and often take far longer than we think they will. This is the importance of selective criteria.
Yeah, and this to me goes back. It's funny that you brought up the idea of the closet. I'm very glad that you did because it's funny. I actually didn't read your book at first because I heard about it in a forum about productivity. I'm like, oh, it's a book about how to clean your closet. Like, yeah, whatever. Like whoever it was that recommended, all they mentioned was the closet thing. I'm like, no, I'm looking for big picture ideas. I don't just want to know how to clean out a closet. And then I started reading it. I'm like, oh, it's a metaphor. Oh, okay. So anyway. So it's an amazing metaphor, but to go a little bit further on that metaphor, if you are going through your closet and you suddenly have all these people walking into your room saying, I'd like to hang this in your closet, I'd like to hang this in your closet, I want to hang this in your closet, how do you solve that? You shut the door. That's what people can do to their email. And I did an entire podcast about this, a full hour about how to minimize distractions, where people treat email, text messages, everything like you have to address everyone individually. But imagine doing that with your laundry. Oh, look, I have a little spot on this thing, so I'm going to put it in the washing machine. Oh, this one shirt is starting to smell a little bit, or it's a little ruffled. I'm going to put it in the washing machine. No, you don't do that because it's not efficient. You put it all in a basket, and what do? You bulk process it. You can do the same thing with email, but now, like you're saying, with these buffers and these priorities, you can now start to bulk process more of your life because your inbox, whether it's email or whatever it is, there's a great quote. You may actually know him, Brendan Burchard, because you guys kind of travel in the same circles. But he's a personal development coach, and I love the line where he says, "Your inbox is just a collection system for other people's agendas," and that hits the nail on the head.
Yeah, I think on my worst days, I think my tombstone will read, "He checked email." We just have to shift from this and to be sure that we are pursuing an agenda that we deep down know is our highest point of contribution. You know, if we don't do that, then we will become a function of other people's agenda for us, other people's even worse than that. It's not just their agenda, it's just their momentary reflection. I mean, I've had people, I mean, some people's the distance from a thought to their email is almost zero. And so they just email us on a whim. They almost forget they've emailed us sometimes. And we're just suddenly now acting upon that. This is not the right decision-making approach if we want to be utilized at our highest contribution. That's what I've learned.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And now that I've created the analogy that we're all treating ourselves like dirty laundry, I want to wrap up and be respectful of your time, but I want to make sure that anybody listening, and I hope it's everybody that was inspired by looking at life in a different way and becoming more of an essentialist, where can they learn more about you, about your book? How do they jump into this?
Well, I just think, you go to gregmckeown.com, you can sign up for the newsletter there. But I actually just think really, you start with the book. Even if a book seems too much, you start with the first chapter. There's sort of an executive summary there anyway. And you just let the idea touch you and see if it seems relevant to you. And then maybe you share it with somebody else. And because I've learned that becoming an essentialist is not a solo sport, It's really a collective experience, or it's not going to happen. So you involve somebody else in it. Just read the chapter with them, and you just let the conversation begin and then let it continue.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I will say that I was terrified when I emailed you, thinking I'm emailing an essentialist to ask him on my podcast, please don't get his stock no response. And I didn't. So I cannot emphasize enough what a great pleasure it was speaking to you today. We are cut from the same cloth, of the same mind, and I'm glad that we can share some of these philosophies with my audience. So thank you so much for taking the time, your essential time, to be on the show.
Zach, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to episode 81 of the Fitness and Post podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to access any of the resources discussed, visit our show notes at fitnessandpost.com/81. As a reminder, if you have a question that you'd like us to answer on an upcoming Q&A episode, just submit your questions at fitnessandpost.com/questions. For every question that I read on the show, I will send a Fitness and Post t-shirt and a blender bottle. And I will then do a random drawing amongst those winners, and one person a month will receive a 30-day supply of my favorite green supplement on the planet, Athletic Greens. I discovered this stuff via Tim Ferriss, and it is fantastic. I drink 1 tablespoon with water in the morning, and I get 100% of my daily required amount of greens. Plus, it doesn't taste like the bottom of a shoe like most green powders. It actually tastes really good. To learn more, just visit fitnessandpost.com/greens. This episode is sponsored by GeekDesk. GeekDesk provides high-quality adjustable height desks. With the simple click of a button, you can change the height of your desk from sitting to standing in seconds, which can help you become more productive, ease and prevent pain, stay healthy, and live longer. I've owned a Geek Desk myself for years, and I love it. They're strong, durable, and dare I say, even quite sexy. Geek Desk serves office workers, corporate professionals, creative professionals, and businesses of all sizes. To learn more about the different options that they offer, visit fitnessandpost.com/geekdesk. Elevate your work, improve your health, increase your productivity. GeekDesk. Thank you for listening. Be well.